What's up, guys? Whether you want to build stall, want to play stall, or you hate stall, this is going to be a good video for you. And whatever, regardless of what tier you play, the idea for this video is not to talk about Gen 8 Uber's stall and cores and everything, but to demonstrate how to go about building a team, how everything works, what you need to account for when building, and showing you some examples. And it's not only great for understanding how to build stall and play stall, but also how to play against it. And that's speaking from experience, because after having played stall, when I play like balanced teams against stall, I recognize the weaknesses they might have to my team and how to exploit them a lot better. And even if I lose, at least I understand the matchup, and it's a lot less frustrating that way. So that's what I mean when I say it's good for even if you don't like playing stall. And I think that a lot of the joy from playing defensive teams can come from building, iterating on the team as you play, as opposed to just playing it. I mean, personally, if I was playing someone else's stall team, I would not be probably not be having that much fun. But I don't know. But I personally like playing my own teams for the most part. I got rank 1 the last Ubers format when we had Zacian here in Gen 8, and then in the current format, I built 2 of my own teams a while ago. Semi-stall teams, took them to both to 1760s, or around rank 3, rank 4 at the time. And so I'm actually going to be breaking down one of the teams that I built that I haven't mentioned on the channel. Um, and but besides that, building a team from scratch, just showing you the thought process, showing you all those checkboxes, and so you can take that to other tiers. And when you get to those tiers, it's going to be your responsibility to learn the metagame, learn the threats of the metagame, and then learn all your tools. And there's some really obvious ones, like things with Regenerator, that are going to come to you. But there's a lot of creative ways to deal with Pokemon, and I'm going to dabble on that. That may not you may not recognize at first, and that's exactly how it is for me. And even now, I'm still learning new ways to deal with things. There's more creativity to it than you might think. So anyway, without further ado, I got 2 sides of the screen here. So this is my personal list of threats for this metagame, and it's in a way it represents the order of thinking that I have for when I'm going about building a team. I've gotten pretty good at building teams fast. It's not a skill that I had at first, but it's something you develop, and so it can be a lot of fun. But I've learned how to put things together faster, and I've learned more tools. I have more tools at my disposal. It's not about taking 6 of the fattest, most common style Pokemon and putting them on a team together. It's only going to get you so far. It's more about covering as many bases as you can with your team in a reliable way, and that takes some creativity, unless you're just copying someone's team. But so yeah, it's kind of about the approach, rather than the specifics of like my tier or Pokemon themselves, because you're not always going to have Toxapex in every single tier, right? So again, just broader concepts. So here we have the list of the most common sort of threats in this tier that I'm using, and I want to make sure that I check all these for sure. And then on this lower tier here, these are the less common or more likely to be passively checked. So we could either choose to ignore it, and we're going to sacrifice a little bit of consistency, but it's very hard to check literally everything common or less common. I don't think it's impossible, but it is more difficult. So you can either choose to ignore some things, or you can try your best to check, at least have it checked to them. And then down here we have things like how are we dealing with entry hazards, different strategies like sticky web, do we need a cleric, and then what's our win condition, stuff like that. So let's get right into it. All right. So I'm going to start building the team from scratch. How are we going to deal with Zekrom? I personally know a couple ways, and the point is not to tell you every way to deal with it in this tier, because it's going to change. You're not always going to have Ferrothorn. But in this case, I'm going to use Ferrothorn because it deals with Zekrom, and it checks off some other boxes. It gives us a hazard setter, sets up hazards on the most common stealth rocker in the tier, which is Dustmane Necrozma, and it can actually handle Dustmane Necrozma and Zekrom single-handedly. if you really if it's dedicated for that purpose. So I'm not gonna actually do everything here, like forget the nature, but we can go ahead and check off these two. And from my experience, I found this reliable. So not everything, not every idea is going to be reliable in the end, or it's going to require some kind of support. But trial and error and research. Like you can look up forums and everything about how to deal with certain Pokemon. So user resources, user experiences, practice, stuff like that. All right, so Groudon. Now I personally don't like being weak to fire move Groudon, which is pretty common. So I wouldn't prefer to use something like dedicate Tangrowth to dealing with Groudon. So instead, I got three options really in my head right now. I got Giratina, um, Lunala, or Zygarde. And I'm going to go ahead and use Giratina. Now, the one thing I like about Giratina is that he helps against Kyogre. So we may not need a dedicated Specs Kyogre answer. We just have this pivot. Now, the way I do this is I outspeed Groudon and Will-O-Wisp it. Because Groudon is one of those Pokemon that's always adamant. So I say this is a reliable strategy. And we can assume that Groudon and Specs Kyogre, while they'd be perfectly fine being on the same team together, I rarely ever see a team where it's like Life Orb Groudon, Specs Kyogre on the same team, I mean, pretty much never. So I'm going to say this is a reliable strategy. All right. So, and also he's our defogger. Plus, so that's great. So just with Giratina, we're checking off 2 boxes. Plus defogging. So that and Kyogre. So now we're getting further down the list. Eternatus. So there's 2 options, really. We can either do something creative with the combination of Duskmane and Ho-Oh. It's one thing that I like to do. You switch in Necrozma every time. If it Meteor Beams, you switch to Ho-Oh. You're just going to assume it doesn't use Meteor Beam again, because most people won't. And then you phase it out. You don't get 2-hit KO'd by Dynamax Cannon. It's a very creative way. Just another creative way. Or you could just use Blissey. That's going to make you... we'll give it Boots to make it immune to entry hazards. And since we have Giratina for Spect Kyogre, and then it's another Xerneas check as well. So we could say, kind of check both of these off. Now, I don't like to just use Blissey for Xerneas, because it can run Psyshock, it can be a physical set, and you can just be prone to crits in that Confide loop. But for the sake of this video, we'll just go with that, because it can be reliable like the majority of the time. So yeah. Alright, Marshadow. We could use Toxapex, we could use Physically Defensive Eternatus, we could use Tapu Bulu. But since we already have Zekromancer, I'll skip Tapu Bulu. I think Eternatus is good. I think Physically Defensive Eternatus is good, because that gives us our Yveltal answer. So we could check off these 2, which is good. Alright, so we're narrowing it down a little bit. You can see, the further along you get, the trickier it becomes, because you're running out of breathing room. But that's just part of the process. And if you find that you have a huge flaw in the team, then you iterate until you find a good structure. Alright, so are we going to use Tyranitar? Are we going to use Yveltal for Calyrex? I would say probably... or Porygon. It's a little riskier to use Porygon, though. Use Audino. Let's go Audino. Audino, it's not perfect against Calyrex, but I used it on one of my teams, and I found it to be pretty dang good. So let's just say that for Calyrex. And it also is really good against Scarf Darm, so it's going to be physically defensive. So check that box. Alright, so we got Landorus and Pheromosa. So what can help against those 2? Well, I'm not sure. I mean, we could use Giratina for Landorus, but then weaker against Groudon. Um, it's a tough one. I would say you can't use Toxapex. Could use Buzzwole. Yeah, could use Buzzwole. Uh, yeah, that should be really good. So let's just say Buzzwole. Um, and yeah, so that is an example team. Um, Unfortunately, we do not have an ice resist, but actually Buzzwole is so incredibly bulky that it may not matter. Uh, but yeah, and then that way we check off all the boxes, and then we may check off a number of these. It's not a perfect team necessarily. It might be viable for getting pretty high on the ladder though. I could imagine. All right, so we got our defogger. We have our toxic spikes absorber. Um, yeah, so that's just an example of building a team from scratch. You're just trying to check off, especially the major threats, and then as we play this team, we can recognize the weaknesses of the team. Maybe find a creative way to check some of these guys, or wall some of these guys. Maybe swap out a Pokemon here or there, or just start a new structure entirely. And it's kind of like putting a puzzle together. Um, yeah. All right. So now let's talk about a team that I've already tested and played. This is not a team I've talked about on my channel yet. Um, so this is a really cool team, very unique team. So actually similar to the team I just built, but we're gonna sort of go down this list and talk about how we're dealing with everything on the list. So Zekrom is dealt with by Tapu Bulu, very reliable. Necrozma is dealt with the Giratina and also Audino. Audino has Thunderwave and Encore. It's a little shaky, but you're spreading Giratina kind of thin, but that's what it does. Groudon is dealt with by Giratina and Tapu Bulu. Kyogre is dealt with by Blissey, Giratina, and Eternatus. Beam Eternus is dealt with by Blissey. Xerneas is dealt with by Dustman, Necrozma, and Blissey. Marshadow is by Tapu Bulu and Eternus. Yveltal is by Eternatus. Kyrex is by Audino. Scarfed Arms by Audino. Necrozma. And Landorus, Tapu Bulu, if it has a poison move, that's not good. Giratina kind of helps. It can be a little shaky. But some of these are a little shaky, but it did get to 1760, so, despite all that. Pheromosa is kind of weak too, that's for sure, because Triple Axle is annoying. But it's kind of weak to Pheromosa, I'll give it that. So, depends. Like, if it's a banded Pheromosa, that's going to suck. Alright, so going down here, Zygarde is dealt with by, like, kind of Giratina, because they usually don't have Dragon moves, or Audino. Tapu Bulu, Scarf Dracovish is Tapu Bulu, Eternatus, Giratina. Regieleki, Giratina, Eternatus, Weavile. It's kind of weak to Weavile. Mewtwo, it's weak to Weavile. Mewtwo, weak to Rayquaza. Karen Black, you have Necrozma. Ho-Oh. If it's Banded Ho-Oh, I mean, it's really hard to wall Banded Ho-Oh. It's one of the best stall breakers that's actually that good. And versatile. So I won't check that off. Urshifu can Tapu Bulu, Eternatus. Kyrex Ice is Necrozma. Cinderace is just Giratina, Eternatus, kind of. Melmetal, Necrozma. Cloyster, I'll just kind of ignore that, but Cloyster's not that common. But and then we have a Defogger and Giratina. We have Toxic Spikes Absorber. For webs, kind of just a slow team in general, so webs aren't that big of a deal. And we have heavy duty boots on Eternatus. We have a Cleric and Audino. We have Rocker and Blissey. And it's actually a semi-stall team because this Necrozma is actually Dragon Dance. Um, so it's a pretty fun team to play. And then I will mention a video I made on this team. This is one of my favorite teams because Dialga is like it's a very unique Dialga set. It's a semi-stall team that I got took to 1760. Very cool team. So watch that video if you want. So just to basically put it in bullet points, and I think these pretty much apply to every tier. When you're building a stall team, it goes like this. First of all, you need to deal with the most common threats of the tier. How are you going to do that? Then you need to consider the less common threats. But also, I think in second place actually is from there would be so the common threats, and then the entry hazards. How are you going to deal with those? Webs, leads, hyper offensive leads, if leads are very common in the tier. And then do we need aromatherapy? And then the less common threats. So common threats, indirect damage and strategies, defogger, cleric, and okay, bullet points. Common threats, indirect things like entry hazards, and you gotta have defogger, stuff like that. Then less common. Do we need a cleric? That's number 3. Basically, do we need aromatherapy? And then deal with as many less common threats as we can. And I would say that's kind of the sort of list of things that you have to do when building or approaching building a team. And when you get really good at it, it's really fun because when you find a new tool, it makes you really excited because you start thinking, oh man, how can I build a team around this? And it's just really fun that way. Like I'll give you a couple examples of things that I sort of learned were defensively useful that sort of opened up team building a little bit for me. So I learned how to use physically defensive Dialga to wall Zekrom, physically defensive Eternatus for a variety of things, Giratina, Lunala. I mean, Lunala is obvious, but it's really great against Rayquaza. Using Groudon to check Zekrom, using Zygarde to deal with Groudon and Dustwing. That's a big one because I'm pretty sure I invented that set where you want to outspeed Groudon and then like spam Haze if they Swords Dance or Rock Polish and then Glare from there. Very cool, awesome set. Yeah, so you learn and you may even go about it yourself. Like I would kind of comb through all these things and think like, how could this guy be useful? How could he diversify or expand my toolkit? And then what can I do with that? So I'll give you a really cool example before we go. Lunala, right? Or let's take Lunala, delete Zygarde, and let's take Shedinja. So you're thinking, and one more, Tyranitar. So you're thinking you can't ever use Shedinja with Tyranitar, and you can't ever use Lunala with Tyranitar. And that's what I thought, and it's actually not true, and reliably not true, because Shedinja, let's say Shedinja has one role. It's an important role, and that is it deals with Specs Kyogre. Or let's say Lunala has one role, and that is dealing with Groudon. As long as we deal with Groudon, that's all Lunala has to do, right? And so, but the thing about it is that if I'm always switching Lunala into Groudon, if that's all I really need to rely on for, then I'm fine running it with Tyranitar because Groudon gets up Sun. So it removes the sand, and so Lunala is fine. So it is a reliable Groudon answer in that situation. Same thing with Shedinja and Kyogre. So it's a very interesting thing, and I was very excited when I realized. So that just to give you an example. And I've also learned that Magearna can be good for certain things, checking Xerneas. That's part of the fun is team building with Stall. I think that is the funnest part about it. And then playing those more high rated games where you're really focusing and paying attention. those are really fun as well. That's what gets your blood pumping. Like I wouldn't play stall if I don't have any rating on the ladder yet. I would, the higher your rating gets, the honestly the better stall probably gets because then teams become a little more homogenized at that point. Um, and also the more limited a tier is potentially, then stall can be pretty good there too. Because I personally think that when we lost Zacian, Ubers became a little more diverse, and it actually made playing stall a little bit harder because of the amount of diversity. So it's really counterintuitive that way, but it's yeah. Anyway, so I hope that you guys found this video useful. Like I said, I wanted to be sort of a broad approach to discussing stall, and I've topped the ladder with stall with a team I built myself, and then played other teams I built myself. I'm really not the type of guy to play other people's teams, so I enjoy team building, and that in a way kind of is probably why I like playing stall more than probably the average person because it's a lot about building your team, iterating on your team, and it's a lot of fun. But it also helps you become a better offensive player because you learn how to play against it. So um, it's a lot of fun. If you guys, if you want to discuss um, why certain Pokemon and, for example, this tier are good defensively, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll be happy to talk about what I think of a certain Pokemon. What it might be good at, how you can use it, if it's worth considering for a stall team or not, or a defensive core. So yeah. Anyway, guys, I had a lot of fun making this, and I'll see you next time.